What is an IG live of mine without a technical difficulty? I saw Jamie had logged in, but unfortunately he was not showing up on my list. So Jamie, if you are watching this, go ahead and ask to join the conversation. And if you are watching us there at home, there we go. Here he is, Jamie Metzl. He is a futurist. He is an expert advisor to the World Health Organization, and he is a creator world. As I mentioned in my post, this is a continuing conversation on hope, a continuing conversation because so many of us need it. Jamie, thank you so much. And thank you for your patience as I try and figure out all
You
of my
know,
RG
Thank you, Lynn. I mean, this is this crazy thing. We're all totally dependent on this technology, but most of us don't have the slightest clue about how it works. And so we just press buttons, we turn it off, we turn it on, and hopefully it happens.
Part of what I've loved when we're talking about positive outcomes of this
Mm.
pandemic, I have learned so much. I am like a 95-year-old woman when it comes to technology. I have learned so much. And I've also been connecting to people in totally different ways through these IG Lives. So I'm so pleased to have you here today, especially because we're talking about your organization, One Shared World. When it comes to making hope go viral, you did that certainly with this incredible global summit. A million together to talk about these messages. First, just tell me a little bit about the summit. I know the Dalai Lama participated in this, and so many others can learn so much from it as well.
Well, thank you so much, Lynn. I think so many people around the world are feeling despair. It's such a challenging time with the pandemic, with so much bad news, with climate change induced fires in the Western United States, already in Australia. And at a time like this, there are two options. Either we sink into despair and think, well, we're all doomed, or we come together and say, what's the best part of our humanity, and how do we build a better world for everyone? So One Shared World is a community of people that came together in the earliest days of the pandemic asking that question. And I think that everybody recognizes we don't have the kind of national and global leadership that we need, but we have the kind of hope and the kind of spirit that we need. So we came together, drafted our Declaration of Interdependence, which is now in 19 languages. We launched a big campaign to help the world's most vulnerable people. And this last Thursday, we had our inaugural One Shared World Global Interdependence Summit called Rise or Fall Together. And as you mentioned, it was just incredible. We had the Dalai Lama as a speaker, the World Health Organization Director General, Dr. Tedros, 40 other of the most incredible speakers. And you can see the whole thing live at the One Shared video, I guess, at the oneshared.world website. We had Renee Fleming performing. She sang Amazing Grace, which was just incredible. We had a refugee from a Kenyan camp who was just speaking just as a speaker like anybody else about how connected we are and our responsibilities to each other. We had Syrian refugees speaking. It was just incredible. And we had anticipated maybe 20,000, maybe 30,000 people joining us, and we had 1.2 million. And I think the world is hungry for something different, and a message not just of hope, but of hope and empowerment. Because if we can all come together, we can actually solve the big problems. And that sounds really big and abstract, but kind of our core analysis is that when you look at pandemics, climate change, ecosystem destruction, global systemic poverty and inequality, they all have one thing in common. They're these big shared challenges, and we, collective humanity, we don't have a way of addressing them. And that's why it's impossible to think about addressing successfully any one of them without thinking about how we solve our global collective action problem. And that's what we're trying to do by creating basically a global social and political movement representing our common interests as humans.
And I love you as you're describing this. People are chiming in from all over the world. Hello to Canada. Hello to Russia. We're so happy to have all of you. You know, when you say that you are working to help the world's most vulnerable, that really struck me, because I think that right now, what is so difficult for me to process, because I'm hearing it and seeing it every single day delivering the news, is how
devastating this has been
Mm,
on our families. What exactly are you doing helping the most vulnerable, and how can other people get
yeah.
in on the help?
It's such an important question because if the virus has taught us anything, it's that we're all connected. That if we are in a community like we are here in the United States, where our most vulnerable people are extra exposed to the virus, that means that the virus is going to grow and spread in a way that's going to harm everybody. And the same is absolutely true globally. And so we can't, in the Middle Ages, people thought, wow, we're having the bubonic plague, the Black Death. Let's build big walls to keep it out. And it turned out that building those walls was the worst thing that you could do because a virus doesn't recognize our self-imposed boundaries. And so the way that we're going to address any of these problems is by recognizing that helping the most vulnerable people isn't charity. It's charitable, it's not charity. It's actually the smartest investment that we can make in building a safer world for everybody. So we've started our Rise or Fall Together campaign. We certainly invite all of your viewers to go to our oneshare.world website and join this campaign. And one of the things that we're doing is we are calling on all of the G20 leaders in their summit in Riyadh, or virtual summit, hosted by the Saudis in November, to commit to ensure that every person on earth has access to safe water, basic sanitation and hygiene, and essential pandemic protection by 2030. This is totally achievable. The economic cost, excuse me, the economic cost of COVID over 5 years is estimated at $82 trillion. For what tiny fraction of that could we ensure that everybody on earth didn't just have the basic ingredients of dignity, but the basic ingredients so they can be protected and we can be protected. We need to think differently, and then we need to demand different types of behaviors from our leaders at every level.
I love that you're doing that. I love that that's something that's even being heard. You're also a expert advisor to the World Health Organization. Talk to me a little bit. And actually, somebody is saying, jumping to conclusions, is saying, I wish Lynn would do more Q&As. I encourage anyone who's watching this, if you have questions for Jamie, just type there in the comments what your questions are. I will get them in, I promise. In what way are you advising them, and in what ways can we learn a little bit about what's being done to protect everyone globally?
Sure. So I'll give you a little bit of background. In the end of 2018, a Chinese scientist announced that the world, which nobody knew, the world's first genome-edited CRISPR babies had been born in China. This was wildly unethical and just kind of crazy, but it shows how advanced our science is becoming. So that's when I'm not doing One Shared World, one of my major fields is thinking about the big picture implications of revolutionary technology. My book, Hacking Darwin, Genetic Engineering and the Future of Humanity, came out very recently. And so the WHO created an international expert advisory committee on governance of human genome editing, basically asking the question, we humans now have this incredible power to remake all of life on Earth. How can we make sure that we do it as wisely as possible? So I'm one of 18 members of that expert committee from all around the world, and our report will be coming out in December. But that more intimate connection with the WHO has been really important for me in the context of the pandemic. And certainly there are many people who have been critical of the WHO, particularly for not sounding the alarm earlier. And I think the WHO could have done so. But we need to just be mindful of what the core problem is. The WHO doesn't have its global pathogen surveillance network and system. And why doesn't it have it? Because our states haven't allowed it to have that capability, because they're worried, well, we don't want some international organization poking around in our country. When it was clear that something really horrible was happening in China, the WHO had emergency investigators that wanted to go to China to have a look and potentially sound the alarm. They couldn't get visas from the Chinese government for nearly a month. Why is that? Because we, the United States, countries of the world, we didn't give the WHO that kind of power again, because we were worried that, well, what if they have that power and then they want to come to our country? And the answer is, well, if we have a pathogenic outbreak in our country, we want them to come. And so we all need to, if we didn't have the WHO, we would need to create it. We need it now more than ever, but we need a better WHO than we have. And that means more resources, it means a stronger mandate, and it means that we need to think differently about the role of states in the world. Everybody, if you love your country, as I do, that's really great. I'm the son of a refugee, and I so much of my life is based on my having all the opportunities that I've had here in the United States. But if states control everything, if we don't create a space for coming together to solve our common problems in a collective way, in some cases that may compromise sovereignty a little bit, like giving the WHO a global investigations and surveillance capability, we're not going to be safer, we're going to be less safe.
That may actually answer the question that Shirley has here of, Jamie, what made you work in this field? It sounds that your background and your history is part of that.
Yeah, so as I said, my father and grandparents came to the United States as refugees from Nazism following the war. I've always felt this acute responsibility, a personal responsibility to do what I could do. I mean, I worked when I was 18, I went and worked in a refugee camp in Thailand. I worked for the United Nations as a human rights officer in Cambodia. And this has been, in many ways, the mission of my life. I talked about my work in genetics, and early, in the very early days of the pandemic, I was actually, I'm on faculty for a thing called Singularity University, which is like a university of the future. And I was supposed to give a talk for their COVID summit on whether the tools of the genetics revolution were a match for the pandemic. But that morning I woke up and I felt that's not the biggest question. The biggest question is, why can't we as humans solve any of our big common global problems? And I felt like I had an answer because of the way that we're organized around our states. And a response to that problem, which is that we need to build an empowered global movement, bringing people together, not to get rid of our states, not to get rid of the UN or replace it, but to say that our common interests deserve, at very least, a relevant seat at the table of power and decision making.
One of your titles, your many hats that you wear, is futurist. So I'm very curious what you see the future to be, and then what you see or hope the future to be.
Yeah, it's such a great question. And frankly, it's because I'm a futurist that I gave this talk in the early days of the pandemic. And I said, look, here's what we can expect going forward. And I'm sad to say I was right. I mean, I kept saying, this isn't a snow day. This is going to change everything. You're never getting your old life back. Don't wait for it. Imagine where the future could be and go there. And right now we are at this crossroads, and there are really two different possible futures and two different paths. And it's an equivalent year, I think, to 1918 at the end of World War I, where there were two very different visions of what might follow. There was the vision of the progressive liberal internationalists around Woodrow Wilson, with all of his flaws and shortcomings, but he was quite an idealist. The idea of the League of Nations, of countries and peoples coming together on one side. And the other side, there were a view of people who equally understood the opportunity of that moment, who were rallying people around toxic nationalism and exclusion and wall building, actually. And that second group won and delivered the world into the Second World War, and 75 million people, including many of my relatives, died unnecessarily. So now we have that same kind of choice. We have a lot of people who are peddling a false story. As a matter of fact, we heard it from Donald Trump yesterday at the United Nations. A false story that by putting your country first, we can all do our best. We should love our countries. But if we don't recognize that the only way we're going to save our world for everybody is by recognizing our mutual responsibilities in an interdependent world where our health and well-being and fate is connected to each other everywhere and to the well-being of our planet and our ecosystem, we're going to be less safe. And that's why this is such an important moment. And that's why for all of us who believe in this future, we don't need to say the words, we need to win for our beliefs. And that means winning in politics, winning in the narrative, and delivering this important message.
I really love that you're talking about how there's a great opportunity here. We've been talking so much about the job losses, but we aren't talking about how many new companies are going to be created in this new world, how many different new ideas are going to be created. It is in our worst times that our best outcomes arise. And I don't think there are enough conversations about that. And I love that there are people like you that are spearheading that, because things can actually get done if there are people spearheading it. Before I let you go, I really want to, and I've been curious about this because I am a huge just fan of the Dalai Lama. Sanjay Gupta got to do an interview with him, and I was just, major envy. And I just want to get an idea of what some of his messages were. I know that people can go to your website. It's oneshared.world.
Correct. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
To see the entire summit. But can you share some of the insights?
So let me give you a background, both on One Shared World and on Sanjay, and on the Dalai Lama. So I have had 5 or 6 private audiences with the Dalai Lama in Dharamshala and elsewhere. And I just love the Dalai Lama. And he's so full of joy. And Sanjay Gupta has been one of my my closest friends for over 20 years. Exactly. So if you mention both of those people together in one, then I'm in heaven. And so when I was introducing the Dalai Lama at the summit, because I knew that the Dalai Lama is such a joyous person with such a great sense of humor, I said, I hope it's okay that I use my only Dalai Lama joke to introduce him, which is the Dalai Lama walks into a pizza parlor and says, "Make me one with everything." And
what did you say?
But the funny thing is the message of One Shared World, the message that the only way we can solve our problems is by recognizing our common humanity, may feel new geopolitically because that's not what our countries have been doing. But that's the message of Tibetan Buddhism and frankly, the progressive wing of every religion in the world for centuries or millennia. And so what the Dalai Lama said, and I certainly encourage everyone to go to the oneshared.world website, and you can see just the Dalai Lama's piece, or you can see everything, it's this timeless message that we're all connected. And that if we don't deeply recognize that, if we get into this framework of, well, I'm a good person, so I'm going to provide charity to somebody else, and we don't think that we're connected, our fates are connected, and we're going to be in danger. And that vision of connectivity and mutual responsibility, it's what the Dalai Lama personifies, which is why it meant so much to have him. And it's the message for what we need to do in these troubled times, not just to have hope, but to actually lay the foundations for the better world that we'd all like to live in.
I don't know if you saw my IG Live yesterday, but I am a fellow first-generation American, and I share your sentiments 1,000%. And it's shaped everything that I've done in my life and my career. And I thank you for the incredible work that you're doing. I hope that everyone that has been watching this takes the time to head over to your website to learn more and contribute in any way they can. I don't think there's any small enough of a gesture that won't go so far. And Jamie Metzl, your gestures are leaps and bounds. Say hello to Sanjay. Please say hello to the Dalai Lama. I feel like that'll get me good points anywhere.
Done. Lynn, really, just such a pleasure spending time with you. And thanks to everybody who's watching.
Take care.
All righty, bye.